Hey everyone, welcome back to Secret Sonics. This is Mix Notes number 6. Today I thought I would talk about bass. How to get that bass guitar to sound huge. Everybody knows I'm a bass player, or if you listen to this podcast regularly, you know that bass is my main instrument. And I have, my own opinions about the bass, and I have a certain taste that I like that not everybody likes, and we're all entitled to our own taste and opinions. But I thought I'd talk a little bit about what my taste is, what I like to capture, how I like to mix my bass, and basically, generally speaking, how I mix my low end. So yeah, let's talk about how to get your bass guitar to sound huge. Yeah, and I'd also like to just add that I use my bass playing kind of as a way to make my productions uniquely me, and also as like a jumping off point, like to inspire the rest of the production. Because I know that if I pick up a bass, I'm going to be inspired and I'm going to come up with something new and something that only really I could do, and that really informs a lot of the way I produce music. So these days, when I'm tracking bass, I'm usually using my Epiphone viola bass, which you can see if you're watching the video right behind me, up there on the wall. And it's kind of got that vintage Hofner kind of sound. And at some point, I kind of realized that this is my spirit animal, the bass that I've always been looking for. I took a bass lesson with this guy named Mitch Friedman a while ago, and at the time I was using my Music Man bass, and he showed me a bunch of stuff. And then he took out this really expensive Hofner bass that I could never afford really, but I just started playing it and I was like, oh, this is the thing. I just had my eyes lit up, and I realized this is what I'm drawn to, and maybe it's because I grew up listening to so much Beatles, but there's something about the way it sounds and feels, and that mid-range is very forward, but in a very nice, pleasing way, almost like an upright bass. But it still has plenty of low end, but it's I don't know. For me, it was just the right kind of feel and sound. But it took a while till I was able to kind of figure out just how to get one. And as soon as I got it, other people said, "Oh, this is the bass for you." I remember my buddy Jacob was at a gig. He was like, "This is your bass," and so I kind of have not put it down since I bought it, and I only bought it right before the pandemic, so maybe 3.5 years ago. Before that, I was mostly using my Music Man, and then I was using a P bass for a while. And what I found the Epiphone does is it kind of does what the P bass with flats does. By the way, it has flat wound strings, which you should look up on Google if you don't know. And it does the P bass thing, but it does it better. I don't know. There's a little bit less sub low end, but there's more pronounced forward mid range, and I just like the character of the mid range better. And the truth is, on this Epiphone, I only use the neck pickup. I don't use the bridge pickup, because somehow I feel like the neck pickup is just closer to what I want. And the bridge pickup just kind of takes away from the bass. It doesn't add more treble as much as it kind of messes up the low end. So there must be some sort of phase issue happening. But it's kind of I don't know if you guys know the band. I'm gonna pronounce it wrong. Karen Bang, or something like that. I totally pronounced it wrong. They're out of Texas. They're great. You should check them out. I could put a link below to that band. But I know the bass player, she only uses the neck pickup of the jazz bass. And it's basically the only jazz bass tone I like, because I'm really not into the Fender jazz bass sound. I think it's too sterile sounding, and it's too balanced of a tone. It almost has no character to it. But just using the neck pickup on the Fender Jazz is almost closer to kind of what I'm hearing with this Epiphone with just the neck pickup thing. I don't know. Anyways, I really like that kind of a tone. That's what I'm going for. I'm not afraid to say it. I like vintage, old school kind of bass tone. I'm not as into slappy, poppy, kind of more modern sounding bass tones. So that's my kind of thing, but it doesn't have to be your kind of thing. But anyways, I figured I'd riff on it. And yeah, so basically how do I usually track this viola bass here? Is I'm almost always recording directly, just, straight into my interface. I use an RME UFX. So just straight into there, and then I'll kind of mess with it afterwards. People like to split signals and stuff, and I've done that with other people's bass if they have a special pedal or something, but I'm kind of usually able to get what I want inside the box. And so what I'll often do with the bass is use an SVT kind of amp sim, like the Plug-in Alliance one, which sounds amazing. It basically has two plugs, or there's two versions in the one that I have, and there's a slightly less vintage one and a really vintage one. And so just depending on what the track calls for, I'll use one or the other. So if I just really want to just really hear just very subby kind of woofy low end, then I'll use the one setting. And if I want a little bit more of the attack, a little bit more of that mid-range presence, then I'll use the other one. But they both sound super vintage, and they just have this like depth that just comes out of the bass when you activate that plugin. So I'm almost always just putting it directly on. Not always, but almost always just putting that directly straight on, not even split signal, just that SVT plugin. I love it. And so often I will split the signal after that. So I'll do like, with the SVT and maybe some compression, then I'll duplicate that with the SVT and some compression. And then I'll maybe add some distortion or fuzz or something, or like just saturation. And then I'll maybe like blend that in to taste. But it's also after the SVT, and you really should check your phase when you're doing these things. I find like if you do like a high pass filter on your parallel channel, that can really mess up the phase. So you got to be careful with that. So I don't necessarily do that. In terms of how I compress the bass, it really depends on the song and what I'm going for. I really like the, the custom Opto compressor from the Slate bundle. I've used Sampura's compressor. I've everything. Like I'll for some reason I'm just not consistent, but I'll try a bunch of stuff until I like the way it sounds. Sometimes I'll use a distressor. Sometimes I'll use like a VCA style compression. I don't usually use LA2A anymore. I find that it gets the bass a little bit too woofy. And 1176 don't seem to work for me with the bass. I don't usually use 1176s. But I vary, and it'll be something on how I compress it. And usually I'll compress the original signal pretty much the same as I will the split signal, but I don't always split it. It just kind of depends what the song needs. If I need that extra kind of energy to pump out of the speakers, if it's fighting against electric guitars, then I'll often split it. I'll add some, saturation in that case, kind of how I already said. In terms of EQ, I usually will EQ out where the kick hits from the bass, or I'll even use like dynamic EQ, like the Pro Q3, and you could kind of like, if the kick is hitting at 60 hertz, I could literally just dip it out at 60 hertz, like 2 dB, whenever the kick drum hits with a sidechain. So I will sometimes use that trick. I remember Fernando Ladera was telling me about it, and I had tried it before that, but I kind of got more hip to it again, and it really does add a little bit of extra space when you're mixing. The truth is that I usually mix the bass higher than the kick drum, and there's a reason for this. And it's not just that it's harder for me to make the bass work when the kick is like let's say 100 hertz and the bass is at 50 hertz, but I generally speaking am able to get a kick to be audible better when it's lower and also has that higher frequency stuff, and the bass has kind of that more audible area in around the 100 hertz. And maybe that's because I'm using muddier basses like the Epiphone with flat wounds, and so it doesn't have like that sparkly top end that a Fender Jazz might have. But I just find that I'm able to get the bass to sound really good and the kick to sound really good when the kick is lower and the bass is higher. And maybe it's also that funk thing, you want the bass to really like poke through at 100 hertz versus the kick. So usually that's kind of what I'm aiming to do, is to kind of like cut out the real subs on the bass, give the subs to the kick drum, and let the bass kind of fill out the real bass area, like 80 hertz, 100 hertz, that kind of area. And yeah, that's usually what I'm doing. And I find that makes the track punch better and be a little bit more audible than the other way around. Another comment that I wanted to say about, mixing bass, in terms of like the mid-range and getting that audible in all kinds of speakers and all kinds of stuff. I really like to boost around 700 to 800 hertz with my Epiphone bass. I really feel like that's where you get like the finger sound, and really the bass can just pop out of the mix a little bit. And I really love doing it, especially on the Plugin Alliance SSL J channel. When I lift up like 700 hertz on that thing, it's just really just the bass just like comes out of the speaker in such a pleasant way and such a pronounced way. So that's really great. And in terms of saturation, I'm often saturating my bass with either the Black Box HG2 or maybe like the Waves, what's it called? The BB tubes. I know just like kind of it's even order harmonics or something, but it works really nicely. Or the Decapitator in parallel, just mixed in just a smidge just to give it that extra thing. That's kind of the kind of settings I'll usually use when I'm mixing the bass. And often I'm mixing bass into a tape machine. So the Slate Virtual Tape Machine, I'll usually slow it down to 15 IPs to get a little bit more low end that way, and I feel like it blooms a little nicer. Yeah, and that's basically my approach to recording and mixing bass. I love a little Pultec EQ on the stereo bus to kind of bring out both the kick and the bass, and add that kind of extra warmth and deepness in the low end. But again, everything is source dependent, and so it depends what I'm working on in the mix. Anyways, that's kind of my 2 cents on bass. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out and let me know. I'd love to get some feedback on what you guys think, or if I'm doing something wrong, please tell me. But this is what I like, and this is what I've been doing recently and what's been working for me. And I'm sure things will change in the future as life goes on and things evolve. And maybe I'll come back to the jazz bass. I don't think so, but it might happen. But for now, this is kind of my old school style tone that I'm really into and have been using on most of my productions recently. So anyways, I hope you guys like this, and I'll be back next time with another episode of Secret Sonics coming up next week, and Mixed Notes the week after that, I hope. So keep your ears peeled. And if you did dig this, I'd love it if you'd either leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts if you're listening, or hit like and subscribe on YouTube if you're watching. And I'll catch you guys next time. All right, take care, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Secret Sonics. If you've been digging the show, it would be awesome if you could share this episode or your favorite episode with a friend or two, and or leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher of choice. That's it for now. Have a great week. Take care and dig in. See you soon. Bye-bye.